Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. I'm trying to get the lighting in here right. I'm getting ready to head out to go get my kids, but I was just asked this question and I wanted to hop on super quick and answer it. So I was asked if I could elaborate a little bit deeper on why the Israelites in the Old Testament. Okay, Shani, I understand that we're all God's chosen people. I think it was Acts 17:26 teaches that we're of one blood from one nation. We're all the same. But why did God choose to use the Israelites as a whole and chose them in the Old Testament? What is the difference, the shift that happened from the Old Testament to the New? This one is super quick and easy, guys. We're going to go back to Abraham. Okay. God takes Abraham out of his people. He told Abraham that he needed to leave his people because Abraham amongst his people was the only person that kept himself pure and holy unto God. Everybody else, you see Sarah, you see Lot, we see how Lot ends up, we see how Abraham's wife was. They continue the traditions that they had back in their hometown where they left. You see their characters, right? God told Sarah and Abraham, hey, you're going to have a child. Sarah was like, yeah, right. This old man, he ain't about to impregnate me. We're old, right? So you see the storyline when God told Abraham he was going to make a whole generation of people out of him as much as the stars are in the sky. Abraham was like, well, I don't know how that's going to happen. I'm old, but God, I trust you. If you're saying it's going to happen, it's going to happen. So you see the dynamic where Noah, we fast forward to Noah. What does the Bible tell us about Noah? Noah was the only one, him and his family, that was kept pure, who didn't intervene with the fallen angels, the watchers. His kids didn't have children. He wasn't tarnished. He kept his family pure. This is the difference. In the Old Testament, God made a promise to Abraham. God made a promise to Abraham that his seed would be kept for the sacrifice he made during the transition from his land to the down south where God had sent him, to the south of Africa. Okay? God and Abraham had a covenant, and God is a man of his word. Most people think that it had to do with God choosing Abraham out of everybody else, and he just said, to heck with everybody else, you guys suck, I'm just choosing this person onto myself. Kinda, but not really. The thing is, Abraham kept himself pure in all ways, and then you fast forward, you see Noah did the same thing. Okay? But Moses the same way. So these men of the Bible, of the Old Testament, they separated themselves from the masses and what the masses was doing. So God's grace was upon them more than any other people out there. God was like, this one, despite everything that's happening around them, this one named Abraham, he has kept my ways. He has sought me. This one I can work with. It really had nothing to do with a race. It had to do with when God looked at Abraham, he could see himself in Abraham. Abraham was literally spiritually connected with God. He didn't lose that connection. Just like Cain and Abel. Abel had a connection with God, so much so that he could understand who taught Cain and Abel how to sacrifice. Abel is the second born, not the first, yet you see him knowing what to do, and Cain didn't, despite him being the first. So Abel had a connection and a deeper understanding of God than Cain did. So Abraham Abraham and Noah had a deeper connection with God despite everything that was happening around them. It had nothing to do with a race. It had to do with the fact that these specific people kept the covenant with God. And God will honor that. So when we see in the Old Testament that God was like, these are my people, the Israelites are my people, it is not that the Israelite was his people in the sense of like, these ones are more special than everybody else. No, because how many times God was going to kill them and Moses had to stop him? How many times God was going to kill them and Abraham had to step in and say, God, if it be for 5, would you save for 5? If it be for 10, if it be for 20, Abraham trying to stop God from killing Lot and all his. How many times did they have to step in and tell God, Father, please don't do this? When they were in the desert with Moses, how many times Moses had to go to God pleading? The Israelites was not more special than any other race out here. Jewish people are not better than anybody else. It is because Abraham kept himself literally from the foolishness that was happening around him. How do we know it was foolishness happening around Abraham? Because God told him, pack your stuff. You and your family, you and Sarah need to go. You need to come out of this, your father's house, because the things your father's house is teaching is not of me. Then you see Lot. How do we know they weren't worshiping God? They were doing all this foolishness? Because you look at what Lot was doing in Sodom and Gomorrah. Right? You see what Sarah and Abraham and Lot came from, because Lot created a whole nother city doing the same thing God was taking them out of. So it wasn't that the Israelites were more special. So in the Old Testament versus the New Testament, it's not a contradiction. It's not that God was like, the Israelites are my chosen people, and because I couldn't get them to do what I needed them to do, now with Jesus, I open it up to everybody because I realize I can't get. No, that's not what's happening. In the Old Testament, there were specific men that God had a covenant with, and he made a promise to Abraham. He made a promise to Abraham that his people would be blessed because of the covenant that God had with Abraham. Had nothing to do with a race of people. Nothing to do with a race of people. Nothing. Then you fast forward to Jacob. The 12 tribes come from Jacob. And Jacob had many wives, different races. So even the 12 tribes weren't just Jewish. Simeon, the tribe of Simeon, these people were black, like from the depths of Africa, black. The Bible, you can trace these things. So this misconception that God chose one specific little nugget in the world is not real. It's not true. The Bible doesn't teach that. Israel was literally 12 tribes of different types of people. And then last night, and again, I'm answering a question from last night. Last night in the book of John chapter 1, I showed you that God isn't even worried about your body or a race of people. God is light. You are light, and he only sees the light in you. He's not concerned with when I go to talk to God, or when he comes and talk to me, he doesn't say, oh, look, here come this mixed girl. Mama black, daddy white. Yeah, now he doesn't identify me in that way. He doesn't identify you in that way. He doesn't say, Sharani, are you Israelite? Are you a child of Abraham? No, he doesn't do any of those things. He look at the light that I'm carrying inside of me and see if it's of him. If the light in me is of God, then he's going to have a relationship with me. Not even relationship. Then I'm connected to him. But if he looks at me and the light I'm carrying isn't of him, because who is the false pretender? Satan. Satan comes as the angel of light. So if you're carrying the light of some other being out here and God looks at you, he doesn't recognize you. It has nothing to do with the Israelites. So in the Old Testament, when God has these chosen people, they're actually not chosen people. It was a covenant that God made with Abraham. And because God is not like man, he keeps his word. Because there was many times that ninja wanted to kill all them Israelites. But because of promise he made to Abraham. You don't see the entire the Israelites all getting the same power and authority that Moses and Abraham and David had. You don't see that. It is literally, God sees your life and he says, this one I can work with because I can continuously pour my grace and expand this person, spiritually expand them, and me and them can grow. That's what God did with the Israelites. When Moses came off the mountain and he was glowing, the Israelites felt some type of way and they were like, tell your God we want to talk. Tell God we want to talk to him. But when Moses went to come back to go talk to them and they heard the thunder coming on the mountain, they were like, never mind. We don't even want that smoke. Tell him never mind. You go talk to him. So what I'm saying to you isn't just my word, it's biblical. The Israelites, bruh, there was nothing special. God kept them because of his word, not because there was something special. In fact, most of them died in the wilderness. They died in the wilderness because of their own wickedness. God only preserved 20 years and younger. The kids that were 20 years and younger are the ones that made it to the promised land, apart from 2 other men that God had ordained, because God had sent out, I think God told Moses to send out a group of men and go report back what they saw in the land of Canaan. All these men came back and only 2 of them, when they came back, said there are giants in this town. They're huge men and women and they're gonna kill us. Everybody else was like, they're gonna kill us, they're gonna eat us, they're gonna destroy us. These 2 men came back and said, yes, there are giants over there, but the God that's backing us, he's gonna take care of it. And that tells you that these 2 men had a spiritual understanding that these other men that went to go see what was in the land didn't have. So God saw these 2 men and said, these 2 I can work with. He didn't say these 2 races. He didn't point out that these 2 I can work with. 10 tribes from Israel God cut off. And he only kept 1 tribe in Israel. And you know why he kept 1 tribe in Israel? Because of the promise he had with Abraham. It had nothing to do with the people or the race of people. Solomon, a man that used to be after God's heart, ends up marrying 1,000 women after God told him, don't intertwine with these other women because they're worshiping other gods. And before you know it, you're going to be corrupted. Solomon was like, I'm not going to be corrupted. I got this. What ends up happening? 4 of his wives, he really cherished them, and they were from different cultures and different places who worship different gods. Before you know it, Solomon had built calves and all kinds of statues and idols for these 4 wives. And God had patience with him, gave him a chance to work that out, and he didn't. He still chose to do what he was doing. So God said, I'm done with you. But when he went to curse Solomon and all the tribe of Israel, he said, because of David, because of your father, the tribe of Judah will stay. God is not, I hate to say man because he's above that, but that he keeps his words. So it has nothing to do with a race of people or the Israelites or the Jews. This is why Jesus had to come to fix that train of thought that man has created. It is man that put an emphasis on race and importance. You know what is important to God? how filled with him you are. When he looks at you, how much of him is he seeing? That's what's going to determine how he works through you. So when he says he has 144,000 elects, these are the beings, these are the spiritual beings that when Satan went to fall in heaven and all that craziness turned out, these people stayed with God. There was no swaying them. There was no convincing them. There was none of this. So in heaven, there is a hierarchy of order, just like on earth. You see that Michael, Gabriel, these are high-ranking angels. You see this throughout the Bible. The cherubims, the seraphims, all these, their rankings in heaven. Because God has an order. Why does he have an order? Why does he have chosen people? Because these people, he can trust them to do what he's asking them to do. These people are filled to a larger capacity with God's grace. It has nothing to do with a race. It has to do with how much of him he sees when he looks at you. So if God looks at you and you have a teacup size of grace, he can't use you to the capacity of somebody who's filled as a gallon full of grace. If I'm filled from head to toe with God's grace, that means that just as much as Jesus was filled by God, I am now filled. God can use me to another level. How can I attest to this biblically? I'm going to tell you. Miriam and Aaron went to Moses and said, we need to talk to God. And God said, come talk to me. And they went to God and said, why does Moses get to be so chosen, so anointed, so holy, and we don't? Miriam said, I'm a prophet. Aaron said, you choose me to be your priest. You choose me to be on the temple and doing all these things for you. Why don't I get the same regard that Moses did? God answered them and said, Moses, I spoke to face, and that ninja didn't die. But you want to come to me face to face, you're going to drop down dead. What they didn't understand is Moses' grace was so much more than theirs. It had nothing to do with Moses being a different level of, like, what, I don't want to say it like that because it's going to be taken the wrong way. It had nothing to do with Moses being a different race. It had nothing to do with Moses being none of those things. It had nothing to do with that. It had to do with his grace. Moses' grace was so great that he had gotten to a level spiritually where he was speaking to God face to face. And when I say face to face, I don't mean like this, okay? But Moses could sit in God's presence. Moses used to come off the mount and be glowing with holiness, like glowing, physically glowing, translucent. Because his grace and the level of grace he had achieved spiritually had escalated to a whole nother level. Miriam and Aaron never reached there. They were still sitting there doing what the other disciples were doing. Which one of us is better? Which one of us is greater? Which one of us can do more? Oh, well, Moses only, well, how come God using Moses to that ability? How come he don't use me like that? That mentality right away tells you where they were spiritually. Right away. Because if you're still bickering amongst yourself about what level you're at, what race God is, why God had a chosen race, why God had these are questions that you should have. If you don't know, you should get the answers because you should know these things. You're supposed to know these things. You're supposed to understand these things. But if that's what you're bickering at, your grace is not to the grace of somebody else who already understands that. But it has nothing to do with race. Literally nothing to do with race. You can line up all of us in Acts 17:21. It says we're of one blood. And I said this last night. You could line all the races up, cut all of us. We gonna all bleed the same way. Line all the races up and go down and shoot each one of us. We're going to all drop down dead the same way. This has nothing to do with a race of people. It has to do with how much of God's grace is in you. That determines the level of chosen you are. And you're not chosen because you're so much more specialer than the next. No, you just reached a higher level. How can I say this? Because then comes Joshua after Moses. And after Joshua comes Elijah. And after Elijah comes Elisha. There's men that still keep coming after Moses, which tells you and I that Moses wasn't extra special or more greater than Miriam or Aaron. It had to do with Miriam and Aaron not understanding what they needed to do to get to Moses's level. So you and I are not, the Israelites aren't better than us. They were never better than us. And like I said earlier, the Israelites, God was going to kill them. They were not some special race of people on the outskirts somewhere that God was like, these are my people. No. God kept them because of a covenant he made with Abraham, a covenant he made with Noah, a covenant he made with David. Why did he make these covenant with these men? Because they kept themselves when all the other world around them was going crazy, worshiping other gods, jumping into this. When things hit the fan in the world, these men rose up and said, but my God. When Facebook and people that I knew growing up, knowing daggone well we grew up with God, are out here worshiping other gods, me and my house, no, bruh. We serving the true living God. So when you can stand up, just like Noah, just like Abraham, just like Moses, and say, there's only one God. He is literally the creator of all of us. He sent his son Jesus to die on the cross for us to undo, literally to undo what man has done, to undo what Adam did in the garden. See, a lot of people want to argue about who Jesus was. Jesus, how do we know Jesus was the Son of God? Because of what he did. Jesus literally undid everything Adam did in the garden. Literally undid it all. Why would he undo it all? And the crazy part about it is this. He didn't undo it. The people, the Jewish nation, are the ones that undid it. They thought they were clowning him by casting lots for his garments. They didn't know they were fulfilling scripture. The same people that said this is not the Son of God, this is just the Messiah, this is just the prophet. They were fulfilling the same scriptures that didn't even know they were fulfilling. Then they put a crown of thorns on his head. Why thorns? Because thorns and thistles is what would come from the earth when God cursed Adam. They put a crown of thorns on Jesus' head. Jesus didn't tell them to do that. They did that mocking him. These are all the signs. These are all the things that literally undid the curse in the beginning, undid what Adam did. The temptation in the Garden of Eden started with what? A fruit and a tree. The temptation against Jesus started with what? Food. Food. The same way he went to Eve, he came to Jesus. What was Jesus hung on? A tree to undo where the original sin started. Why did Jesus need to be hung on a tree? To undo sin. What sin? The sin that started on a tree. It is the same. Anyways, I'm going to get carried away here. Let me reel this in. Because the question was, can you go a little bit deeper on why God chose the Israelites versus now in the New Testament, he's choosing everybody? God never chose a specific race. God made a promise to a man named Abraham. that because you did what you were supposed to do and you saw me through all the chaos, I'm going to honor you. I'm going to honor you with the thing you want most, Abraham. You want to have children. I'm going to give it to you. I'm going to bless you. Then God got, I would say, carried away, because he was like, not only am I going to bless you, I'm going to bless all your children forever and ever and ever. Why do I say he got carried away? Because when they built that calf with Aaron while Moses was on Mount Sinai, what did God say? I'm about to kill all these jokers. Moses was like, repent, Lord, don't do that. Okay, so the Israelites weren't better than us. Acts 17:26 says we are of one blood, one nation upon all the face of the earth. Men were created with the same blood from one nation. This is a reminder and a testament from God that we are literally from the same place. In John chapter 1, I showed you guys last night that the light, it says that God is life. And the life is the light of man. We are light. We're not flesh. And we have to get past thinking like we're flesh. When you and I die, it doesn't matter what color I was. You are buried in the ground. Black, white, Indian, Puerto Rican, Mexican. I don't give a crap what race. Purple, blue, orange, green, blue eyes, purple. All of it ceases to exist, but the light in you that God gave you carries on, lives forever. And this is a little bit deeper. I can go a little bit deeper with this, but some of you guys ain't ready for this yet. But when I get to a place where God gives me the green light, I'm going to explain to you how much not flesh you are on this earth. I'm going to explain to you why the Bible said that God clothed Adam and Eve in skin as they were walking out the garden. That one. Adam and Eve sinned, realized they were naked. They sewed together fig leaf. Who taught Adam and Eve to sew? We have to get out of this mindset that this is who we are. And this is what God sees. When you go to God in prayer, God is not saying, oh, here comes my black son. Oh, here comes my Asian daughter. He's not seeing that. He's not saying that. He's looking at you and he's trying to see the light in you. And if your light isn't of him, he has no business with you. That's what he's looking at us at. And the level of grace you have upon you will determine, a cardinal just flew by. The level of grace that is upon you will determine the level of usefulness you are to God. And I don't mean that like, oh, you know, I use you when I throw you away, like how men would see it. No. God will use you to the capacity that you have allowed, the capacity at which you have grown. Because what he's calling me to do, somebody who has the grace the size of a teacup cannot do. They're not there yet. Period. And there are people above me who have more grace. And the grace that is upon them, I can't do yet because I'm not there. But instead of us looking at each other's thing, wondering why we're not there like Miriam and Aaron, what we realize is, if God could do it for them, imagine when I get there. It's going to be worse. I'm going to do it worse than they did it. I'm going to do it. It's going to blow up bigger than them. Because the Bible teaches that God said he will build upon the foundation of the prophets and the disciples. He's going to use you and build upon them, meaning that you start off ahead of the game. Meaning that where the apostles and the disciples and the prophets left off is not where you start from. You start ahead of the game. So if I'm looking at and this is what Miriam and Aaron didn't understand. Instead of them realizing who Moses was in their generation, and appreciating the fact that this great man was amongst them, they were looking at him like competition. Why ain't you doing that through me? Why this and why that? And Aaron struggling still with his old ways. Because you know why Aaron let them build that calf? Because Aaron was still, the mindset of Aaron was still in Egypt. His heart was still set on the ways of the Egyptian gods. They knew how to get instant gratification. So when Moses and God was on the mountain doing the 10 commandments, and Moses had been gone for a couple months, here is Aaron and Miriam who bucked up to God and say, why aren't we like Moses? But they can't see. They don't have spiritual eyes to see where Moses is. Because when the people say Moses is dead, we need to start worshiping our old gods so that we are not abandoned out here in the desert. Aaron and Miriam couldn't see that Moses wasn't dead. So how spiritual are you? If you're spiritual to the level Miriam and Aaron was claiming they were when they bucked up to God to say, show me like you're doing Moses, they would have seen that Moses was alive and well, writing down the 10 commandments, and Aaron would have never made these people create the calf. It would have never happened. But we see things and we say, I want that. I want to be over here. I want to understand why I'm not there, or this or the other. How come this? Well, it's strange that God's working through you like that, but I ain't never experienced that. So it must be fake. It must be the devil. No. Just because you don't have understanding yet doesn't mean that somebody else is demon possessed or that no, that's not what that means. Because God ain't using you like he used somebody else. That's not how this works. God uses us according to our grace. The grace that we've expanded on. That's how he uses us. Period. Okay? So the Israelites weren't anything special. Literally. That was literally God keeping a promise to Abraham and David and Noah. That's what that was. God keeping a promise to these men, which I am thankful that God is a man of his word and he doesn't treat people or anything like men do. Because the minute we act up, men would have killed all of us and there would have been no grace or mercy. But God found favor and found grace. And when Moses asked him to repent, he listened and he did. And he said, you're right, Moses, I ain't going to do that. Because in the desert with Moses and God saw me here right now talking to you guys, clarifying this same topic. And God said, because of her, I'm not going to kill them. Because of you, I'm not going to kill them. You guys have to think past this mindset that you guys have. When you read the Bible, there's not a contradiction. Most men read the Bible out of context. And they don't understand. And then it looks like, and if it looks like, it's coming from a man. Anything that look like something, that ain't got nothing to do with God. God is a yes or no type of man. Were the Israelites chosen? In a sense, yes. But were they specially chosen? No. That was a covenant between God and Abraham. And I can promise you this. Abraham was in heaven, literally telling God, don't kill my children yet. Remember, you made this promise to me. Because when God was going to go kill Solomon and all the tribes, what did God say to Solomon? Because of your father David, meaning David was in heaven telling God, I know he acting up, Jesus. Lord, don't take him out. If you take him out, you see this one, and this one, they'll never be born. And look at all the work they'll do for you. Listen, you guys don't understand the depths and the level to this stuff. But David, God told Solomon, because of your father, I'm going to leave the tribe of Judah. But all these other tribes, they're going to be scattered amongst the world. They will not know from where they came. Why do you think there's so much confusion? Why do you think so many people don't know who they are, where they came from, what is going on? Why do you think men have created the chaos they have? Because Men are deceitful. Men need to feel special, more special than the next. And we're all equal. And for whatever reason, man cannot accept the simplicity of God. God is simple. It's not confusion. It's really straight to the point. Period. Very simple. Acts 17:26. You are of one blood and one nation. You're not even flesh. You're battling the flesh, and it's not even what you need to be focused on. You need to be focusing on developing your spirit, because it's your spirit that I'm going to have a conversation with. And when you die, it is your spirit that's going to come meet me, not the body you're looking at. This body goes back to the ground that made it. My spirit goes before God. Your spirit goes before God. But we are dwelling on the flesh. We are arguing about who Jesus was, color, race, ethnicity. And Jesus was light. John chapter 1, starting from verse 1 to 11. I read this to you guys last night. Jesus wasn't even a race. But yet we want to debate if he was African, if he was these things. Oh, well, God had a chosen people. They were called the Jews, the Israelites. They were from over there in Israel. Israel is not even a location. Israel was a race of people. Literally, Jacob's name was changed to Israel. And Jacob had 12 sons. And that's where the 12 tribes of Judah comes from. Not even a place. So then we see the war over in the Middle East. Deep. There, I'm going to put it like this. Even Facebook was about to cut me off. I was about to break a spiritual law. Listen. And people wrote me today and asked me this. There are certain things I can't say to you guys yet. There are certain things I'm not, this is serious. But I'm going to say it like this, and you're going to get it. Jesus told them, take off your shoes, for the place you are standing is holy ground. There is certain place on this earth that is holy. And so there is certain place on this earth that is holy to God. And it's important to God for a reason. That subject we're going to have to dig into. Those type of things is what we need to be digging into to understand how we need to literally approach God. What power we have to work through this earth to gain souls for God. What power we have to fight demons and the battles that we're being faced with every day. That's the type of things we need to be focusing on. But God loves all of us equally. We're literally the same in his eyes. The only thing that is different, the distinction is if he looks at you and he doesn't see his spirit in you. Because Satan is a spirit of what? He comes masked as what? The spirit of light. He is a copycat. So if you've accepted Satan's light inside of you and God looks at you and he doesn't see himself and he sees that light, he ain't got no business with you. Because here's the kicker. God created Satan. God created Satan and the light that's in Satan. So if you do not follow God and you're following another entity's light out here and you're following somebody else's light and you're influenced by somebody else's light, when God looks at you, you think he doesn't know exactly who you are? He says, I cut between flesh and blood, literally flesh and spirit. God created all of this, all the demons, all the other gods, all the earth, all of it. But we remember creation and forget the creator. We know the blessings, but we forget the blesser. God created all of this. So when he looks at us, you ain't deceiving him. He knows right away what light you got in you. And if it's not of him, he has no business with you. So it's not that the Israelites are more special or more important or more chosen than somebody else. No, when God looked at the Egyptian, when God looked at Pharaoh, God was like, tell Pharaoh that the reason he can't make the right decision It's because I hardened his heart. So when Pharaoh thought that his gods was going to literally be the ones influencing him, he didn't realize that the Almighty God was the one making him make the very decisions he thought his gods was making him make. Bro, this isn't even a game of chess. Before God rolled out all of this, he had already literally created it all. Every outcome imaginable in his hand, he had already analyzed. The God that I serve, this man, not even man, because that's not even the right word. I can't describe him as a man. But men are made in his image, right? So we'll say this creator, this mighty God that I serve, he ain't nobody to play with. But he loves all his children. He loves all his creation. He loves all of us. When Satan went to and fro from the earth, and he came out with the sons of God in the book of Job, and God said to him, have you seen my servant Job? Satan was like, yeah, I saw that ninja. He said, what'd you think of him? You see how he loves me? You see how he worships me? Hold on. Everybody understands the dialogue, but they don't really pay attention to the fact that God is having a real conversation with the devil. God created him. This idea that the devil and God about to have a battle on earth is delusional. God will blink and he will cease to exist. Literally. The battle is for your soul. It has nothing to do with God. But we're getting distracted. We're getting distracted with who we are. Israelites are more important. Jews are more important. The white people trying to suppress the black people. This is a distraction. Line all the races up and start cutting every one of them, and they're going to bleed red. They're not going to bleed their skin color. And when we all die, we're all dying and being buried in the same hole. And when you dig us up 10 years from now, it's going to be bones. It won't be nobody. You won't even be able to tell. Literally. What they got to do to tell what bone it was, they got to go do a forensic investigation. Deep. They got to go deep to try to figure out who you are. Because when they see the bones, you look like a regular, no identity. None. The Israelites weren't important like you're thinking. God made a promise to Abraham. God made a promise to David. God made a promise to Noah. It was a covenant, and he honors that. There is literally a contract struck between God and Abraham, God and Moses, God and David, God and Noah. Because if it was up to him, he would have killed every one of them jokers in the desert. Moses stopped him. So how special were they? Has nothing to do with that. We're neither we're neither Jews nor Gentiles, but Christians can't get past this. We are neither Jews or Gentiles. We are focusing about the wrong thing, guys. We have to stop looking at the flesh. God said, I have nothing to do with your body. The body goes back to the ground that made it. You need to start nurturing your spirit. That is what God speaks to. That's what God uses. That's what God works with. He looks at you and he sees what spirit you're carrying. Jesus was the bridge. Because before Jesus, you couldn't access God. God had to access you. And there was a huge issue with that. Because men are easily corrupted. You see the Israelites, how many times God prepped them. God was like, look, you're going into the land of Canaan, and these people are worshiping this. These people are doing this. People are doing that. People are doing this. And oh, by the way, they're using magic. They can heal people. They can do all these things. And it's readily available. So if you go into the Canaan land and you don't stick with me, let me tell you the blessings and the curse. There's literally like 2 whole chapters on this. Because men are easily, literally influenced and corrupted. All Satan did was like, but did God say you can't eat that apple, that fruit? But did God really say that? He was just really didn't want your eyes to be open. Easy to be corrupted and influenced. But the ones that can't be, those ones are dangerous. These are the Moses, the Abraham, the Davids. But even them fell. But it was God's grace that kept them. But their hearts was forever after God, despite what the flesh had them do. Because Moses, all of them fell short from the grace of God. All of them. None of them was perfect. None of them. If they were perfect, we would have never needed Jesus to come. Because God would have accomplished his will through one of them. So really, how special was the Israelites? Really, how special was Moses, David, and Noah? If Jesus still had to come to fulfill what they couldn't do. In all of their glory, Moses was so holy, God himself had to come and tell him to die. He couldn't even die. God had to say, Moses, surrender your spirit, bruh. You need to go so that Joshua can step into your place. And Moses was like, yeah, I'm going to do it. And then he didn't do it. God had to come back and remind him, hey, bruh, I say you need to die because it's time for Joshua to step into his role. And then Moses dies. The only other person in scripture that you hear that from is Jesus. Jesus said, I didn't lay down my life. I'm giving up my spirit. Nobody makes me do this. I'm doing this because I want to. And Elijah didn't even die. He just went to heaven. So in all their holiness, in all their glory, they were still not holy enough to break the curse that Adam started in the beginning. They were still not holy enough to undo what Adam did in the beginning. This is why Jesus had to come. And how we know Jesus is the Son of God? Look at everything he did. He undid everything Adam did. The first sin started with a tree and a fruit. Satan tempted Jesus first with what? Food. Jesus had to die on what? A tree in order for our sins to be released. This has nothing to do with a chosen race. I think I've answered this question. This like get me. This like get me because we focusing on the flesh. We are literally distracted. That it has y'all need to start cultivating your spirit. Start cultivating your spirit. Because a lot of us are naked spiritually, but clothed perfectly in the flesh. And you need to be clothed spiritually. In Genesis, I read to you guys last night. When God made Eve, at the end of chapter 1 of Genesis, the Bible says, and they were naked and were not ashamed. Adam and Eve knew they were naked and they felt no shame. The nakedness was not spiritual. So Adam and Eve was clothed spiritually. This is why they had no shame. But when they fell in the garden, now you see shame shows up. Now they realize they're naked in the flesh. You know why they could see that they were naked in the flesh? Because their spiritual clothes was stripped from them. This is why God does what? Adam and Eve sows fig leaf. They made their own clothes, but it wasn't good enough. So God clothed them physically because spiritually they had lost their clothing. We need to start shifting gears and paying attention to how we're clothing ourselves spiritually. This is not a game of the flesh. That is a distraction that Satan is doing. Jesus' color, Jesus, all this different race stuff is not relevant. It is important to know, just because if somebody comes and says something to you, you have to still be able to give an account, right? So we need to know these simple things, but we don't dwell on them. They shouldn't captivate our soul. We shouldn't now go make a whole podcast about Jesus being white. What we need to start focusing on is our spirit and what we need to be nurturing spiritually. Because the flesh ain't got nothing to do with this. And people are still going to miss what I'm saying. But anyways, I've answered the question. The Israelites, they were nobody special. Nobody special. They were just like you and I. So much so that Jesus had to come to emphasize just how not special they were. But God made a promise to Abraham, David, Noah. He made a covenant with them. Jacob. He made a covenant with them. God had to honor his word. Because what did he say? My word does not go out void. And it is not idle. So God had to literally honor his word. But them jokers, them Israelites that y'all so dwelling on, these Jews, God was going to wipe all them out in the desert. Literally. It would have been God and Moses just chilling. Because Aaron and all of them was going to be wiped out. But Moses stopped them. Solomon again. Solomon sinned so bad that God was like, I'm about to wipe all these jokers out again. But David was in heaven, reminding God of his promise, because the first thing he says to Solomon is, if it was not for your father David, all these tribes. But I'm going to keep one, the tribe of Judah, because of the promise I made to David. You guys, everybody is special in the eyes of God. We are of one blood from one nation. We are not even flesh. You're dwelling on the wrong thing. We're spirit. God bless you guys. I hope you have a marvelous day. I hope this makes sense. And I know I've answered the question. But God bless you guys. Start seeing how you are dressed spiritually. Start looking at how you are dressed spiritually. And address it. That's what God cares about. When God looks at you, he wants to see your spirit. That's what he's looking at. He ain't seeing your flesh. Anyways, God bless you guys. I gotta go get my kids.